Hi, this is Sunil Hali, and we're back to our favorite show, The Leading Force. Humble, hardworking, brilliant, investigative but caring. These are the words that come to your mind when you think about this individual. You have been seeing her week after week on her favorite famous show, Connecting with the Community, or maybe at an event where she's covering a community event in the South Asian side, or who knows, trying to crack a story which is difficult and investigative. Yes, this is the same person who we have been watching on her show for last 20 years, Renee Lobo Mehra. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I found that such a touching introduction, caring and investigating. I think that was amazing.
No, well, that's a part of your job,
Right.
but you have never been not caring,
I know.
and you're not just an aggressive investigative journalist
No,
while going to the jails.
I think I reach
and
out to
checking
the people, and that's my biggest
That's what
strength.
makes you Renee Lobo. On this show, Renee is the leading forces about individuals and organizations who have done extraordinary work in last 30, 40 years and make our community proud.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, and thank you for having me on your show. It's a privilege.
Well, we have a journey to cover. Let's talk about who is Renee Lobo.
Oh, wow. You know, generally I'm on the other side asking people questions. Today I'd like, talk about it. So, well, I think I just find, broadcasting was my passion from day one. I think it was my calling. At age 10, I was starting out with, BBC's kids shows. And these are little shows that I started doing, and I got used to the microphone. This was like for the radio. Then I did little, the Shakespearean Society. They had the Kids Shakespearean Society. And so I got involved in that. So I got involved in theater at the age of 10. And then at 16, I was doing full shows.
Now, you were born in New Delhi.
I was born in Delhi,
And
yes.
then
But I grew
because-
up, I went to Italy. My dad was a labor commissioner.
Right.
So we were there for 3.5, 4 years. I started learning Italian better than English at that time, And moving from one place to another was, I think, at that time, very jolting for me. But I think it gave me a bigger horizon of pictures, how the world functions at that time. Now we're all global, but at that time it was a little difficult.
Absolutely.
We were not in a digital age. But I think it made me a more sensitive, caring person, understanding different cultures, different people, different ethnicities and
When did you
background.
move to US?
When I was 16 and a half.
Okay, so that's like the perfect age, as they say, for any immigrant to come to this country.
Yes, exactly.
Because you have this solid foundation of your South Asian
Right,
culture.
right.
And now you go to the college life
Yes,
and build
exactly.
the next level. So you went to
Right.
college over here.
I did my bachelor's in broadcast journalism and American studies. Then I did my master's in political management. So bachelor's from SUNY Old Westbury, Long Island, and then master's from George Washington University in DC.
Wow.
Yeah,
this is, I guess, even I know you for 20 years.
Right.
We did not know all this about you. We know you, like you said, on the other side of the fence. But while you were growing, I'm sure your dad had a great influence, your mom, who you love her so much.
Right.
If you think about your past, who comes to your mind when you think of a mentor?
My dad didn't want me to be a journalist. Let me just tell you that right off the bat, because he thought this was not a stable career. And I'm coming from a very conservative, Kashmiri, Punjabi background. It was very, I thought he was very annoyed with me that, he thought this was my passion, not my career.
Obviously.
And, he wanted me to be a doctor, teacher, IT person. These are your so-called,
Hobbies.
careers for
Those
South
are
Asian
career,
community.
this is
Yeah,
only
this
a
is
hobby
the
to be. Yeah.
So I had to fight against the odds, but I would say my mother and my grandmother, my nani, were very much instrumental. The women in the family were the ones who really pushed me. So, and my grandfather, my nana,
So
he was my
who
mentor.
would you give the credit to be your mentor? As a person, Renee Lobo,
I would
as a
say
professional?
my mother.
Okay.
Definitely. She pushed me because she got married very young. She was 16 when she got married. And so she wanted to see in me what she could not do herself. And I hope I came up to her expectations because,
Yeah, well.
and I think later on my dad did recognize that, this is what I want and this is not just my passion, it's my calling and this is what I want, it's in my blood. So then he said it's okay, but by the time I lost
from
it.
his point of view, talking of like late 80s, early 90s.
Yes.
Especially coming from an Indian family,
Right.
a decorated father who is a class 1 guest officer
Right,
from India.
right.
the first thing that comes
conservative.
the first thing that comes to mind is either a doctor or an engineer when you are from India.
Exactly.
And here, on top of that, being a female,
Yeah, I know.
Even today, it's a taboo to think of anything outside of the standard professions. So it was difficult for him to think. But why did it come to your mind? What came in your mind when you thought of journalism as your career?
You know, as I said, I started off with 10 with little kids shows. So I got used to the microphone. Then I started thinking, my grandfather used to always say, do you want to be a lawyer? I said, I don't want to be on this side of the fence and then, be on the other side and so forth. This was not my side. So I decided, why don't I do stories that connect people, communities? So I became more than just a journalist. I became more of a psychologist, a people's person, getting more civic oriented. So it became beyond journalism, but I decided to do it because I thought, I want to bring in stories of people who are creating the news.
Yeah, that's your strength anyway, the human interest stories that
yes,
you do.
Absolutely.
When you moved to US, you were 16 and a half, a very impressionable age.
Yes.
And US was still coming of age, evolving, and we were still happening the community as a community. Was there any cultural conflicts you faced?
Absolutely. I was living in the shadow of two cultures, even in Italy, but I think Europe was a little different. USA was kind of different from Europe. And I thought, straddling two cultures, living in the shadow of both worlds, who am I? That identity crisis came in earlier with me, even in Italy. But in US, it was more the peer pressure, plus doing something that your father doesn't want you to do. So I was going through a lot. It was becoming very complex for me. But I guess as I said, my mom, my grandmother
and you have
was
a brother, right?
Yeah, and I have an older brother.
Right. So
but my grandmother,
was he supportive?
Not that much.
It was a men versus women in the family.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But my nanny, my mother were very, very supportive of this. And I do remember that later on, my brother, he's now he loves me to death with what I'm doing.
Because of what you've done.
But my father didn't see me grow that much. I lost him when I was young.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But so they were telling me, you are Indian at home, and then I'm outside an American. Who am I? Where am I growing? And how am I growing? Those pangs of growing up were very strong at that time. Now we see a lot of Desi clubs, fraternity clubs, and we see, South Asians going in a different culture.
That's why I said it was so difficult to think of 90s.
Absolutely. It was very, very hard.
Honestly, when you sit back by yourself and be honest, do you think it was the fame, the name and the fame?
No, it wasn't that. I've never looked at it that way. Once I've done a story, that's it, it's done. And that's a corollary to that it adds on to it that, okay, you're getting noticed and appreciated for what you're doing. But it's not that. I think it's more that you want to put out something that you really think is important for people to know.
But when you walk, let's say you're walking around in Queens, you're walking in New Jersey, Oak Tree Road, anywhere in Manhattan, you go to Embassy, the ambassador's home, everybody knows
it's a good feeling.
Yeah, but was that the motivation?
No, it was not the motivation at all. That came afterwards. And I just took it in my stride, but I never thought, I'm doing this because I want to be famous and people are going to look at me and say, oh, there she comes. It was not that. I mean, it's a good feeling. You feel good about it, and you feel good that people are appreciating the fact that, they like what you're doing. But that was secondary, absolutely.
And you had a very, very solid education behind it.
Yes.
Because you could have very easily gone into the United Nations, you could have gone to Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Into policy and making or whatnot.
Right.
But it's very strange to think of a girl born in Delhi, grown up in Europe, and then coming to US and such an extraordinary education to think of this as a career.
Right.
And once you decide this is what you want to do, did you ever train for it? Look, journalism is not necessarily the easiest thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean, I interned at CBS
Broadcast
News.
journalism.
I did intern at CBS News. Okay. And I think that was for like 4 or 5 months. And that was a very big eye-opener for me. That's the beginning stages. And slowly you learn the trade. First you think you know everything. That's the age when you're 16, 17, you think you know everything and you get cocky and confident. Then you say, no, there's a lot more to learn. And as you grow, you look back and say, I can keep honing my craft and my skills and understanding by looking at other, broadcasters and seeing how they're operating. And you begin to develop your own style and once you know what you're doing, you still continue to do.
Who were your favorites on TV at that time?
I have always admired Barbara Walters. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, I still like Katie Couric, but Barbara Walters has always been my all-time favorite. You know, when I first watched, 2020, I said, this is what I want to do.
Not Diane Sawyer.
Diane Sawyer came later on, but first, when I was 17, that's the lady, you know, that's the one. And I read her autobiography and everything, and I thought it was amazing and very touching. You know, living in a man's world where, you know, where the guys are ruling you, and you are calling the shots, and they're saying, what is this, you know? So she went through a lot herself.
Now, when you think of Barbara Walters, she was in a certain genre, and then you think on the minorities side, Oprah Winfrey has done extraordinarily well.
Absolutely. That was later than I, you know, when she came in
the
90s, I thought she really changed a lot of, there was a paradigm shift, you know, in broadcasting.
Yes.
And she did that.
Yes, yes. And how did the career start, finally, the takeoff?
You know, it's funny, one of my earlier interviews was with Vijayanti Malaji. And I had no idea, you know, I'm coming straight from Italy, and I'm just thrown in the lion's den, and this was at the Hare Krishna temple in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And at the, you know, ISKCON Street, there's a very big temple over there. And she was with her husband and her son. And, you know, as a kid, as a teenager, I'd written all those questions. You know, like, technically you start with, okay, she did Sangam, and she did this movie, and she's a dancer. So I wrote all of them. She looked at me, she said, you're the one who's doing it? And she was very, I would say, you know, arrogant about it. And I'm happy she was.
Yeah.
She looked up and down, and she said, you're the one. And she, you know, she wanted to kill me, literally. She's like, who's the little pipsqueak of a girl who's going to do my interview? And she thought she's a celebrity, and she was. So she tore the paper. And she said, you're not going to talk about this. We're going to talk about Hare Krishna movement. I had no clue. She said, you got 15 minutes. What do you want to do? So I took on the challenge. I really did. And I think that inspired me further, because then I came back and I said, I'm ready to do it. And you won't believe it. I met her a couple of years ago. And I said, you made me what I am, because I had to think on my feet. I had 15 minutes to think, what is the Hare Krishna movement? How is she involved in it? And so forth. And interview her husband and her son. And that gave me the strength to think, you know, at the same time, you know, like you're doing something cold.
Now, this is when you were working already with ITV.
Yes, yes.
How did you find ITV?
You know, my teacher in school said, you want to intern? So I did CBS and I did ITV internship.
Oh, wow.
And that's what happened.
That's an institution.
First time, you know, and that's how I started with them. And then I got this interview with Vijayanti Mala. And she, you know, I cried in front of her. I touched her feet a few years ago. And I said, look, you made me what I am.
Yeah.
She said, I did not know that my attitude
Now, this
helped
was
me.
for a certain segment of a news.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
But your
yes.
real show that you're
Later
claiming to
on,
fame,
I started doing it.
which will
Yes.
come back after
Yes.
the break.
Okay,
and we'll talk
great.
about that.
Absolutely.
So we'll be back, right? Stay there and for a small break.